Welcome to NTD's China in Focus. I'm Fiona G, filling in for Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, one of America's most popular online shopping sites is in hot water. Arkansas is suing the Chinese-owned Temu, accusing it of being spyware in disguise. Another Chinese retailer also facing pushback. A UK-based human rights group is launching a legal bid against fast fashion giant Shein. Both of America's top political parties share concerns over competition with China. Beyond economic reasons, they're also zooming in on national security.
We have to beat China.
And how can we defend America from the Chinese Communist Party's political warfare? And what does the term warfare really mean? Retired U.S. Navy Captain James Fanell just testified before the Oversight Committee and spoke to us about it. Arkansas is taking one of the most popular shopping apps in the U.S. to court. The state sued Temu and its Chinese parent company Tuesday, alleging that Temu is malware disguised as an e-commerce platform. The lawsuit said it's designed to get unfettered access to a user's phone by overriding data privacy settings. As for what kinds of data it collects, fingerprints, locations, text messages, contacts, camera access, and documents. The lawsuit accuses Temu of selling this data to third parties to make money. Temu was the most downloaded app in the U.S. in 2023. It allows American users to buy cheap goods made in China, and it's owned by a Chinese company called PDD Holdings, which is listed on the NASDAQ. The lawsuit also raised concerns that Beijing could get a hold of the data collected by Temu. That's because Temu is owned by a Chinese company, and under Chinese law, companies must hand over user data to officials if they ask for it. Arkansas's Attorney General alleges that Temu is led by a cadre of former Chinese Communist Party officials. Temu denies the allegations, saying they're based on misinformation and are totally unfounded. But the company is in hot water. Congress is investigating Temu over data security concerns, and the state of Montana banned Temu and TikTok from government devices, citing threats to user security. Last year, Apple suspended Temu from the Apple App Store for misrepresenting the type of user data it's capable of collecting. Apple later lifted the restriction. Google suspended parent company PDD's app in the same year because it contained malware. Arkansas is seeking a $10,000 civil penalty on Temu. Another Chinese fast fashion retailer is facing pushback from human rights groups. Online shopping giant Shein is planning to go public in London, but listing is proving a difficult task. Take a look.
A human rights group has launched a legal bid to block Shein's expected share listing in London. Stop Uyghur Genocide has written to Britain's Financial Conduct Authority, urging it to refuse permission for an IPO. It's retained a law firm to take up the case. That comes amid concern over labour practices in the China-founded company's supply chain. The group campaigns to protect the Uyghur minority in China's Xinjiang region, where the US and others accuse Beijing of running labour camps. This Reuters video from 2019 shows what China calls a vocational educational training centre. Officials have repeatedly and strongly rejected all claims of abuse at such facilities. However, Shein was forced to drop plans for a New York share sale after US lawmakers raised similar concerns. On Tuesday, Amnesty International said a London IPO would be a badge of shame for the city's stock exchange. It too accused Shein of questionable labour and human rights standards. Reuters sources say the firm confidentially filed for an IPO in early June, paving the way for a listing later this year. Shein has previously said it is strengthening its governance and compliance to address labour worries. The FCA has no power to investigate alleged breaches of legislation not under its remit, including the UK's laws on modern slavery.
Shein could soon face even more scrutiny under a new rule from the European Union. Starting this August, the European Union's Digital Services Act will prevent Shein from selling counterfeits in the bloc. On the Hill, Republicans and Democrats share concerns over competition with China, but differ on budget allocations for the Commerce Department. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has details.
The House Appropriations Committee unveiled this Wednesday the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2025. The Commerce Department is set to see a 9% cut to its budget.
The Republicans have suggested that in the light of all the success, that they actually want to diminish your budget. We really can't afford to do that, especially since they're asking you to do more and more and more.
Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimundo urged lawmakers in the House Commerce and Energy Committee to greenlight the White House's budget request for the Commerce Department for fiscal year 2025.
This budget positions America to prevent China and other countries from obtaining U.S. technology, U.S. capital, and expertise for activities that threaten our national security. We have to beat China. That requires a strategy, and that requires investment.
Secretary Raimondo stressed that competition with China is one of the top priorities of the Department of Commerce, and not just because of economic reasons, but also because of national security requirements.
We need to outcompete China. Wake up every day asking ourselves, how do we outcompete China? I literally shudder to think of the risks to America's data and privacy of, let's say we had 1 million Chinese cars on the road, all connected, all collecting data from Americans, all of it going back to Beijing.
Republican lawmakers in turn stressed Secretary Raimondo on labor practices that the Department of Commerce evaluates in order to provide subsidies.
The Biden administration has made no secret of their intent to use the CHIPS Act to benefit labor special interest. The CHIPS Act was first passed as a national security imperative, not a bill to increase the union rolls.
Every lawmaker in Wednesday's hearing at the House Commerce and Energy Committee questioned the secretary on Chinese unfair economic practices. But when it comes to countering Chinese technologies and U.S. markets, the Secretary Raimondo had no set plans. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A House hearing with a powerful title, Defending America from the Chinese Communist Party's Political Warfare. Lawmakers heard testimony on the subject Wednesday, including from retired U.S. Navy Captain James Fanell. He was Director of Intelligence and Information Operations for the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Steve Lance with NTD's Capitol Report spoke to him about his recommendations to the House Oversight Committee.
Our government, particularly the IC, intelligence community, and DoD, had been overtaken by this idea of threat deflation. Because we had been dominated by a school of thought, the engagement school, that said if we engage with China, things will, that'll work things out eventually, that China will, become more like us. They'll change their behavior and become more like the international order. Well, after 40 years of engagement, China didn't really change their behavior. We've begun to change ours, unfortunately. And so we needed to recognize that occurred, that shift occurred, and that when it came to the IC, and the DoD, in many cases, we downplayed the threat of things that we saw. For instance, there were people that said, "Oh, China will never have an aircraft carrier," and now they have 3, and they built them in basically a decade. They went from no carriers to 3 carriers, and the latest carrier that they have has a lot of the advanced technology that we have on our latest carrier, the USS Ford, with this electromagnetic aircraft launch system. Technology that not only was stolen by China, obviously, but they also were given it in a way because of our multiple levels of engagement across the government and industry and think tanks and academics. And so we have allowed ourselves to be enmeshed with the Chinese through this notion of engagement, and then the impact was we downplayed the threat. And so what you see is over time, the intelligence community habitually in one way looking at China. It was always, oh, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. That capability is not really as worrisome as it's going to be another 10 or 20 years. So over time, when you see the IC constantly making assessments that downplay the threat, we classify it then as a threat deflation strategy, and that helped us, unfortunately, not to be prepared, because the mission of intelligence is to really warn and call out threats before they become a real existential threat. And we didn't do that. And now we're facing this critical situation that we're in where China, across all elements of national power, whether it's military, economic, diplomatic, or information warfare, China is in these positions of strength that they didn't have 30, 35 years ago.
And so, James, if you could give us an idea how the U.S. can build a national security strategy. I know it would take a long time, but just the bullet points to start us off.
Well, in my recommendations, I said the first thing we need to do is we need to have a commission that looks at and examines the IC and the DoD to understand why it is that we missed the threat and why we downplayed the threat. And we need to recognize, or we need to identify how those failures occurred, why there were no checks and balances, and we need to eradicate those kind of failures in those institutions. And then we need to go after, what is our goal? What do we want to have as the United States? So we have to define what it is that America stands for and what we want. And I think it's to be free and to be able to control our own destiny, separate from having influence or being subject to another foreign power. So that has to impact everything. Like, we want to have a good, clean environment, but do we want to go into all this, electric vehicles and all of these things whole hog right now when China controls the means of production for all of that? America didn't like to be held hostage by OPEC in the 70s over gas and oil and their control over the pricing there. Well, why would we want to go out of that situation and then go into a situation where we're under the same kind of threat from China when they control all the means of production for electric vehicles and the Green Deal and those kind of things? So we need to be very clear about what we want, and then we need to define those areas where we're going to take action to basically isolate ourselves from those threats from China. And unfortunately, it's going to mean decoupling these economies. And that's been anathema here in Washington to say that. But we have to start now. And it won't be easy, and it won't be without some pain. But if you don't eradicate the cancerous tumor out of our body politic, which is Chinese communist influence, then we'll die from that.
Jim Fanell, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus. Or subscribe to our partner platform, Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Security in the South China Sea. The United States reaffirming its ironclad commitment to the Philippines' security. That's as China has been ramping up its aggressiveness in the region. 2 former Chinese defense ministers have been expelled from the Chinese Communist Party, but does the official reason match up with the truth? Congress unanimously passed the Falun Gong Protection Act. The executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center, Levi Browdy, breaks it down for us in just a minute.
This is a bill that's literally going to save lives.
Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Fiona G, filling in for Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.